We'll call the meeting to order. I just want to welcome everybody to the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union Policy Draft Committee. And I'll go over the agenda items and we can see whether all of them, whether we need to make any adjustments or anything along that line. Then we'll have an introduction to whoever's in the need to participate. Agenda items, the first item is public comment. We're just going over to let everybody know what's on the agenda, and then we can make some changes. So public comment will be the first item. And second item for discussion will be policy 5156, student nutritional and wellness. And then the second item on is policy 4020, appointment of administrators, for discussion and talk about how we want to break that up. We have the policy draft on participation of the board to have some discussion on that. A draft policy on employee expectations. It says on SVSU and one to be posted. I don't know whether we have them because I didn't have those, but and then we have the tracking sheet. So right now, that's the agenda. Does anyone have anything else that they would like to have added to the agenda or make some changes to the agenda items?
Leon, I was just wondering, I know that some time ago Catherine had stated that we would be discussing or seeing or reviewing special education policies coming down the pike, and I was just wondering if we could get an update on that at some point?
I don't know anything about it, but
We can ask.
did she leave anything with you, Frank, on that?
No, not on that.
Was that changes that was supposed to be coming specifically or just a policy dealing with
A
special?
series of policies dealing with special educate, the development of policies in that area.
From the Vermont School Board Association?
It was to develop SVSU's own policies on special education following the guidelines that have been put forth.
Because I don't have that down.
Okay. I'm sorry, maybe I should address it at the SVSU instead.
Thank you very much.
Well, I still can ask that question. We have it here. And we'll ask that question and you can ask it at SVSU if you like as well. But I wasn't aware of anything that was specifically set up to be for special ed along that line. Bruce?
I just had one thing. I had a note to myself that I was supposed to have done some work on the public participation at board meetings and sent something, which I think is now available in paper form, sent something to Lisa this morning after she sent it. It jogged my memory when we got the agenda that.
So is that?
That's what that is, and there should be a version of it. I think Lisa said there would be a version on the flash drive as well.
Yes.
I will look, I think there might be.
Okay.
It was. So
There isn't much content difference, although there is some content difference.
what we want to do is keep it on there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would actually we'll keep it on the same place on the agenda, and then
Okay.
you folks can decide what you want to do with it.
So as far as I can see then, there's no changes, no additions to be made, only one item to verify special ed policies by SVSU in the future out there. So
One other thing is moving five to the next meeting or another meeting. That
you
will-
want to move 5 to the
Yeah,
next meeting?
Yeah, we don't have that information.
Okay. So it would be great for the public purposes is to just have a brief introduction of who's in here. This is our second meeting since the election and we have some new faces. So you can, we'll start with Sam.
Sandy Foster, Woodford, principal.
Bruce Lehrman, North Bennington Graded School District.
Bruce Lee Clark, I'm from the CDC.
Jackie Kelly from the BST.
Dick France, Woodford.
Leon Johnson from Mount Anthony.
Frank Barnes from the SVSU.
Rick Pembroke. I'm not on the committee. I'm just here to support Sandy.
And we have,
Derek Carson from the Bennington Banner.
and we have,
Lori Mulhern, community participant.
Holly Van, Shasberry resident.
who do we have?
Gene Rowley, BSD, and Food Service Advisory Committee.
Okay.
Holly Van, Shasberry citizen.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. And so with that in mind, we'll open the meeting. This is a different format. We put aside to put a special area in here for public comment. And so seeing that we have several members from the public, it's not school board members, we have some items that you would like to discuss now. Something new, Laura?
I just wanted to provide feedback on the public participation at board meeting policy, and I don't know whether it's appropriate to do so now or wait to the agenda item.
So unless it's something you know specifically right now that you want to do, we'll come to that. This is a new format in terms of doing this. So in this committee, I would think that we would want to hear discussion as we get to each one of them, as opposed to have an individual try to
Okay.
do all the stuff, because this is a working committee. This is a draft committee, and we're trying to work on things to get things incorporated for the good of all. So with that, no other public comments. Let's go to 5156, nutritional and wellness policy. That policy has gone through the food committee, and Sandra went back and took some things from our last meeting out, and we had some information from, I think Bruce set in, or somebody from the Career Development Center set in. And so now we're back, and Frank have it posted on the board there so that we can all see it, and I'll give you a chance to start talking, Sandra.
Okay, so I took this back to the Wellness Committee, Food Service Committee, and what we did was added back the background, which was recommended from this committee, so that the piece that does state background research indicates that section went back in, changed a few words, and left the one sticking point that seemed to be in this committee, the word campus, under the nutritional guidelines, because the committee felt that the federal guidelines specifically use that word campus. And the committee did not feel as though they wanted to change the wording of what the federal guidelines were. So they left the word campus. Pretty much think that everything else is about the same as what it was before, with a lot more taken out that we didn't feel was necessary, because it is in the federal guidelines.
Okay. Bruce?
Sure.
Want to go back and talk about the campus?
I do,
word?
just briefly.
I'll let
And
you-
can we just define school campus as the federal regulations define it? It's 210.11, 210.11. It's 7 CFR 210.11, subsection A4, school campus.
Right.
I mean, I have it right here. I mean, you're welcome to,
Well, I hope
that's
I
the
have
CFR.
the same
Okay.
thing that you have.
And
You
the
should.
The
This
reason
was-
you're asking that,
Yeah.
I mean, just to let everybody realize what's happening here is that we have a unique situation. We have a career development center physically connected to the building in which we have a high school.
Right.
And the policy here is dealing with the
The high
food
school.
services at the high school, but when you speak to the word campus, everybody think all encompass is everything connected to that, which you have two different, say, school districts, one a career development center and Mount Anthony together. And that's what some concern is trying to define and make sure everybody understand what the boundaries are. in terms of this
It's
policy.
just, I would agree with Lynn. It's just that if I was reading this as a parent, I think I know what a campus is. But unfortunately, or whatever, for whatever reason, the feds don't define the campus that way. So they define it, I mean, this I just pulled up today and it says it's current as of April 3rd, so, of this year. But, so, see if it says the same thing. School campus means, for the purposes of competitive food standards implementation, all areas of the property under the jurisdiction of the school that are accessible to students during the school day. That's this, I don't think it's changed.
Nope.
And I would just ask that we somewhere, wherever is the appropriate place, but preferably someplace that's near, maybe it's right after, during the breakfast and lunch periods, and then quote this definition for, so that the public understands it, or at least has a chance of understanding what school campus means. That's what, I guess that's where I would put it, but I don't care where we put it. I just think it ought to be there, because it's not,
That's line 80.
Why wouldn't after the word campus, you just put as defined by the federal regs, blah, 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 blah?
because then
They
you're
don't
forcing
understand.
somebody to walk into the federal regs and get it, when you can in fact just define it.
We're forcing that all the way through here.
I know.
Well, it's just in this particular case.
I mean, because we actually made a, a conscious, I'm on the food service
I
advisory
understand.
committee.
Yep.
We made a conscious decision that, why rewrite something that's already been written into law somewhere by somebody else? We're referring to it, we refer to it as a legal reference, and we actually have to follow it by law. Otherwise, we'll lose
No, I agree.
$2.5 million
Sure.
worth of revenue, so I
We
don't
don't-
see the sense of rewriting the entire document.
Well,
I hear
Richard,
you.
I wasn't talking about rewriting the entire document, I was talking about adding one sentence, because the word campus is not, as written in this policy, is not descriptive of the regulation, and it's not even cited in the correct spot on this regulation. It's not at 7 CFR 210, Appendix B. That's where the nutritional value stuff is, absolutely. But the definition of campus is at 210.11A4. And all, it's one sentence, that's all I'm asking for.
So, and I understand, when I open this up, and what I'm trying to get everybody to understand, it would not be a problem if the two buildings were separated.
Of course.
Total. The confusion is that when everybody looks at the policy and they think about the Career Development Center connected, they don't separate the two.
No.
And so being proactive is what you're trying to
That's
do,
what I'm
is
trying
do
to do.
something here to get everyone to understand that this policy deals with
The high
Mount Anthony campus itself.
Does the CDC have their own set of policies?
Of course.
Yes, and
They're there,
we don't have a
and they
food
would
service.
not, and they don't have a food service, so this policy is not relevant to us.
I guess that's my next question. So this
Yeah.
doesn't even become relevant because you don't have a food service.
Correct.
That's correct.
No, we believe it's relevant to you, and we would just be saying, it's important, if I was a parent, and I was looking at this, I would wanna know, what does that mean? I would think I already know what that means, the word campus. If I look at the Mount Anthony campus, for example, I think I already know what that means. It's not what it means under the federal regulations. That's the point. Because the federal regulations are peculiar about what it means. It's the area that's under the jurisdiction of the school board that are accessible to students.
So that's a clear-cut
It
sentence,
just
I think, a
strikes,
statement.
it's a really
I
short
don't
sentence.
know, I think that's as clear as mud, frankly.
Well, I mean, yes, but I'm
Well,
saying, putting it in the policy.
Because
is mud.
technically, that entire campus is under the jurisdiction of Mount Anthony Union School District.
No, technically it's
Mount
not.
Anthony owns that entire property, and they lease out a piece of it to,
Right.
That's right, so it's not under the jurisdiction of the Mount Anthony School Board. That's precisely the point. That's what a lease does.
But it is connected to,
It's connected.
Of course.
That's
so it will then, according to the federal guidelines, it is under the jurisdiction of this policy.
No, it's not. And that's where the issue is here. You got two separate school boards. One is a career development center that has its own superintendent, director, and own curriculum and the path it goes in. It does not have a food service, but it has particular items it has in terms of home economics, in terms of food services, in terms of developing students, in terms of the type of studies that they do. That's not serving lunches and doing other things as what this policy address here. And that's where the confusion is, and we need to separate the two along that line. Dick?
It seems to be an important enough definition in other policies. We have places where we put a whole definition section. There's two things I would recommend. One is we put it in there and leave it in there, but we leave it defined according to how our lawyers would define it.
Sure. I would like.
And then it's clearly defined once, and we don't have to put it in 200 times in a policy. And
I would agree.
maybe the lawyers at the same time will be able to clear up the jurisdictional issue, because it sounds like we're never gonna do it here.
Well, and you can see right here in this meeting, there's still confusion about another school district and who has jurisdiction. And trying to say, because I'm connected and because we have students there, we can control them with a policy that has nothing to do with that school campus.
Is there any statement in the current policies or regulations regarding the two schools that mentions the word jurisdiction, that provides a guidance as to who's in charge of what as far as these two areas of that property are concerned?
There probably is state law on that, but it's,
Okay.
that's a harder issue than you think.
The difficulty is gonna be, and
Right.
we can spend the next 4 hours sitting here having this conversation.
Right.
The difficulty is gonna be the feds. And when this first came up, when they first drafted all this new language, which was probably 2 or 3 years ago now, which is just starting to be implemented, I was actually at a conference where one of the bigwigs from Washington, I explained our situation. She said, well, during lunch hours, then you gotta shut a gate down so no one can get in there. I said, I can't do that. I said, there's classes going all the time.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And, you know, it's like any, whether it's Washington or Montpelier, somebody writes a law, they don't understand
Right.
what the implications or the
Right.
practical applications are of these things.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I don't have a problem putting the definition in here. We still have a difficulty of what the definition of a definition is, because I don't know what the feds are gonna do. Ultimately, they're gonna decide this thing. If they ever audit us, I just wanna make sure this is in the minutes, whoever's taking minutes somewhere along the way. Because if they ever audit us, and they walk in and say, no, I'm sorry, I mean, I understand that's what it says, but, because the way it was described to me is, during lunch hours and during breakfast hours, nobody can have access to that school store. And let's just put the facts on the table.
To the
And-
school what?
To the school store, because they're serving unhealthy stuff out of that school store.
Mount Anthony don't have a school store, and I meant to do that, and so.
Has nothing to do with Mount Anthony, Leon.
It's a CDC.
I realize that, and so what I'm trying to get you to say here, you're right, access to that store, well, Mount Anthony has to do something in terms of, if you're saying you wanna put up a gate, you can't do that because you got students going transit along that line.
Right.
But you cannot dictate to another school district in what they should be doing in terms of a technical educational school. You just simply cannot do it. And so we can argue the point all we want to. We can put anything we want to in here, but we cannot tell the superintendent and the director of the Career Development Center that they cannot do this.
But the feds
Part of
can.
their curriculum.
The feds can.
They have no jurisdiction right now in that. We do not, it is not a food service provider over there. And that's what I'm trying to get everybody. So what we're gonna do in terms of moving on, we have to smooth something out in here. And for the time being, if I think we can agree to put a statement in But then if somebody else come back with something different, they're gonna have to deal with technical education or technical schools to talk about their curriculum and how they should be, what they should be doing in terms of their culinary department, and whether they have in their stores and things along that line in terms of hardcore language to be able to do that. But right now, there's nothing out there saying that you can't not do this in your store as a career development center, or you can't do this part of the culinary. Now, agreed, that they're sensitive to the fact that Mount Anthony campus is there. You got to remember that everybody, because we're joined together, is really sensitive to that and are trying to do everything it can to get students and the instructors in the classrooms to provide things in a nutritional manner or advertising that along that line. But that's the purpose of the Career Development Center. Randy. Oh.
Sorry.
Well, I guess what will then end up happening is at the next food service committee meeting it'll be my proposal that we place security at the connections to the CDC, that nothing that is purchased on that side can be brought into the Mount Anthony schools, because then it violates, especially if it's during breakfast and lunch, it violates the competitive agreements that we have with the Abbey Group.
Okay. So I'm gonna that's great. The same student leaves the campus and goes to the store and buys something. I'm gonna have someone stand up at the door at the parking lot, supposedly, and keep them from going over here, filling their belly up and coming back. Mount Anthony, you can say that, but I'm just trying to get you to see what you're saying here. Somebody's got to pay for that, and some kind of way of controlling that.
Well, I
Jackie.
personally think it's gonna be a very hard thing to police, because kids come packed with all kinds of snacks. And whether they get them from the campus store, whether they get them up their sleeve, in their backpack, wherever, they come loaded. And it would be a very, very, very hard thing to police.
Also, I'm not sure that,
Bruce.
given that they could buy those things any place in town, that you can implement a set of procedures to prevent them only from bringing material in, foods that wouldn't be liable or available to be sold.
But
That
that's,
doesn't speak to that at all.
no, it speaks to selling
The law
in
doesn't-
terms of the
Exactly. And
BLM
it says
product.
selling. So what I'm saying is that this discussion seems to be kind of away from the
Right.
policy.
Right.
As long as the question is over the jurisdiction. If that
Right.
is in fact a separate jurisdiction and foods
Yeah.
are available there, they can buy them just as well as they can buy from the country store.
That's what I was, the point I was getting at, but I wanted to make sure that this Career Development Center is really sensitive to the fact of where the students are coming from and that they're joined along that line. What this board has to remember, you cannot dictate things along that line, and so we'll work in a proactive manner to convince whatever the food service group, the campus store in which how they do business in terms of training students to do that, to minimize things as much as possible along that line. That is the most that we can get out of this. So
Doesn't the high school also have vending machines?
we have vending machines at the high school. They've not all been removed, have we?
Just liquid and anything that is not of nutritional value has automatic clock on it, so it can't be sold during school hours. It's only like after 2:30 in the afternoon or something.
Okay. We got,
My other concern with adding this sentence, which is more germane to the policy, is the objective I have, or the objection I have to restating policy that's stated elsewhere.
okay.
Because it leads to a duplication. There is no longer one single source of the policy, as in here, in this case, it's a federal regulation that pertains.
Right.
I know that we've done that elsewhere. The less we can do that, I think the better off we are, because it leads to duplication and unnecessary revision of the policies when these policies change. If they change the policy, we don't have to change ours as long as we still have the same reference. So I'm,
But all I'm asking then, if you want to go that way, then at least let's put in the correct reference, because
Okay, well, that's good.
I agree absolutely. The other thing, I think, the sentence that would be helpful is, for the purposes of this policy, we consider the jurisdictions of CDC and MAU to be separate.
Yeah, that's a good
But
one.
somebody's
You
gotta
can say-
make that decision.
But-
and
But
we're
that's
going to
not
put that in.
correct, so you can't
If
put
it's
that in
not
the
correct,
policy.
that's fine. Then it doesn't need
It
to be
is,
stated.
I don't
That's
think-
that's your creation.
Wait a minute, one of the things we're gonna do in here is, we're not gonna have sidebar conversation, we're gonna direct them up here, and you get recognized, and we can have a discussion along that line. And I'll summarize things as much as possible along that line. So, Gene,
But the problem with that is that's this committee's creation. There's nothing that states that in this policy or the federal guidelines that states that anything about jurisdiction.
okay, and so we've had that, we've gone over that, so we won't be trying to put jurisdiction in the policy. We'll leave it at. I think one of the things we got out of here is having the right reference.
Nothing that states anything
So,
about
Bruce-
jurisdiction.
So, Bruce,
Come back.
I mean, we're gonna share because we got everything
Sure.
online here. Let me have,
I just had two
Laura.
questions on the policy, and
Okay.
one, if that's okay. One of them is in regards to item B on the first page. It was, nutrition education programs shall be conducted by appropriately licensed staff members. Is that a little vague, or is everybody okay with that? I was just wondering, because it kind
It's
of,
fine.
I'm
Or
not
It's
certified
fine.
staff members?
it
certified
says
staff member.
appropriately licensed, and I'm not sure what that term means.
But it's proper, if you wanted to say, I don't think it's anything wrong with it. It's a proper statement for that. So
It's
it's
appropriate
okay
without
to question it,
identifying-
but it's proper.
Right.
Okay.
So,
And then on page 2, item D, the food should not be used in district schools as a reward or punishment for academic performance?
it's absolutely a true statement, and it's one that needs to be stated
That's item-
along that line.
I'm not saying it's not. What I'm thinking is that there's also, sometimes food is used for behavioral
It
incentives.
is not to be used for punishment, and that's.
Or
Nope,
reward.
I'm talking about behavioral, not academic.
Right, this is academic.
Right.
This just says
Okay.
academic.
Right.
Referring to.
What line is that?
Right, but that, it's
Can
actually.
you refer to the policy by line number, please?
Page
56.
57.
Thank you.
Line
Okay.
56. Do you have the
Okay.
line numbers?
No, not on my copy.
So,
All right.
yes, I mean, those are good comments to question, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's a true statement, and it should be in there as it is.
Well, I think her question is, should it say academic and discipline, or whatever, what was it, is that your word?
It's
you used?
behavioral,
Behavioral.
sometimes for,
Academic
you know,
and behavioral.
different programs, or
Wait.
maybe student performance as opposed to identifying academic or behavioral or anything like that. I mean, I don't know, but it just seems like it's very strict.
It's intended to be that way, I
Right.
thought.
It
I
is.
thought
Right,
that's-
right.
So
is-
it doesn't limit then someone using it for behavioral incentives.
Correct. It
Right,
limits it just for the academic piece.
Right.
right.
So it's okay for people to use it for behavioral reward. So
Well,
someone can, okay,
Yeah,
and
okay.
to me, that's just not,
So what we wanted to say is nothing wrong with the statement. And so if how people wants to try to use it and it's being used inappropriately, then we have to address that issue out there along that line. But for the purpose of this, it's exactly like it should be. Okay, so I just wanted to go back and clear up so we can move on with this particular part of the policy. One of the things that I see in here that the consensus is that we can get the correct reference in the policy pertaining to the definition of campers. And that will be the only change that we say we're making in that particular policy. And then we can move, we'll be wanting to have that policy go on the SVSU from this committee, once we get the references updated.
Okay, so do you want me to add anything to this as it sits right now? Nothing?
Just the
Okay.
reference.
Just the
Yeah.
reference.
You know, he can make that right now if
You
you
wanna
want
make
to.
it?
Yeah,
You can make it, it's after the word, after that sentence that includes the word campus, it's 7 CFR 210.11 A4, parentheses A, parentheses A, parentheses 4. Right.
Okay, and that's in, should that be in,
Should that be up or instead of the other one above? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
So Bruce,
no, because I think the one above does relate to foods of minimal nutritional value, which is in the appendix.
Okay.
But if you start looking at Appendix B for what a campus is, then you're not gonna find it.
so under
Okay,
the, under the
so-
legal references, Bruce, as it's currently described, does that need to be changed as well? Because it reads Code of Federal Regulations, comma, 7 CFR, Part 210, which I.
No, that would be perfect.
which I
That's
assume
10,
is the entire
210 is-
210.
It is, but you know how big 210 is? It's huge.
Yeah, I do.
You know,
I do.
right? So I was just hoping that people would at least, we gotta give them a chance. to
Only
explain
because
it.
of the situation of the joining
You gotta
campuses.
give them a
that-
chance.
That's fine, I just want to make sure that you.
No, I think
You
it's
got it all
perfect.
covered.
No, I went
Okay.
back and looked, and that seems perfectly fine to me.
So if we can, with that change, this thing will be going on to SVSU for a warning for its next meeting.
Why didn't we say bring the school back?
Okay, Sandy?
Yes,
Sandra?
thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. It's a good, healthy discussion. The next item.
Thank you much.
Yes, thank you for coming. The next item for discussion is policy 4020, appointment administrators. And this one is discussion regarding the separation of the superintendent from the principals and other central office administrators. And here's what we was wanting to do. We were talking about that last meeting, and I think we had some consensus in here that that was the way we would like to go in terms of
Yeah.
separating that out. And the logic behind it is, as it stands right now, and we have some issues with the two, the superintendent at the end having to recommend a superintendent. Now, we have an appointee, or you have acting superintendent, something out here, we can do that. But as we go through this policy, I lost mine, I'm having to go back out and bring it back up. But I think it's the right thing to do is to separate the two. And so we can start with
what would you like to be?
the opening policy in terms of appointment of administrators or appointment of a superintendent. However we want to do. If we're gonna make this one the superintendent, we're gonna need to split out the two policies.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to agree on a name.
Well, there ought to be one, this one, could we, since this one already says administrators,
Yeah.
and it's 4020, what's the possibility, I don't know whether this is possible, I'm just thinking, but appointment of administrators other than, and then add other than the superintendent, and keep that one at 4020, and do a 4021, which is, however, is it appointment of superintendents? Is that, I mean, is the word appointment right?
Well, that's.
Is that
Yes.
what it is? I think that's right, but it always strikes me as odd, but that's.
But the board will be appointing.
Right, that's what I'm,
Okay.
yep.
So to separate out here, the first thing says, okay, if we
Let's
can
just
agree
change the
that
name
just
to,
the name right now to make this one 4020 stay in terms of the appointment of administrators other than the superintendent. Is
Right.
that
yeah.
so? We want to say other than the superintendent here.
Do we have any other classes of administrators other than buildings principals?
Well, we have the
Sure.
billing here at central office
We have an
too.
assistant superintendent.
Assistant superintendent for those.
Okay, I only say that because in the rest of the text, it makes only that distinction between building principals and superintendents.
Right,
Right.
as if those were the
But
only
then
two
at the
classes.
No, I would
end,
think
it's
it would.
confusing once we start to
Can
go
you
through
keep
it.
this and just make the exceptions at the end for superintendent?
Well,
In
that's-
other words, let it apply to all administrators, but then at the bottom, make an exception.
Well, let's go down through and we're gonna see where I'm gonna give you an
That's a
indication of where the
possibility, but I
problem
think-
is along that line when we go through here as to why we wanna separate it out for superintendent.
Right.
In terms of that, if we left that topic there and we go down, so now we can start to scroll down through, line by line, once you save it.
Get that out because we gotta get this out.
So you started to scratch out for,
Yeah,
for superintendents.
yeah.
Right, we started to change this,
Yes.
which we should have been scratching out superintendent here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's what
Yeah.
should have happened. This policy applies to the appointment of building principals and,
Yeah, you were scratching
and-
out principals.
but we just changed the top subject to say this policy
Right.
was for appointment of administrators other than the superintendent.
Right.
So everything here, okay.
whenever you do this,
Let's see.
right,
The policy applies to-
actually, we have a multiplicity of statements here.
Yeah.
At the very top, Leon?
Let's take them one.
Yeah,
Okay, I
that's
see
before you
building
got
principals and
to, before you get to
superintendent.
Roman numeral 1, up above, it is the policy of, and then you've got the district's name.
Right, I see
To
there.
follow a consistent
Hiring
hiring
practices.
practice pattern for, hiring process for,
Building
and
principals
see, and I
and
would get rid of
superintendent.
that language just strikes me as adding more must than it needs to. It's because, exactly for this reason that Bruce mentioned,
And the
for the
reason,
process for hiring administrators, not including the superintendent.
okay, so that mean that particular line, which districts to follow a consistent hiring process for
For-
building principals.
No, get rid
Wait.
of building principals.
Uh,
Get rid of that, just all administrators other than the superintendent. Because building principals are administrators.
right, right.
I'm
But
think-
are all administrators principals?
No, but you would therefore include them all.
So
Right.
I'm saying the whole line you want to get rid of, starting with the district, or you just want to delete the
Nope,
word building
nope.
principal?
I wanted to delete, I want to add for, don't do anything yet, Frank.
That's-
This is the way I would read it.
Okay.
At least just so that I can see it. I mean, I'm partly thinking out loud, and I apologize for that, but there's almost no way to do this as a committee. For process for follow a consistent hiring process for all administrators other than the superintendent.
You can state that again in there, and I think that would be appropriate.
Well, that's not
Okay.
again, that's the first time.
That's
That's
yes, just the
actually,
topic.
that's actually the policy statement. It is the
Right.
policy of. Everything else flows from that. So if you don't get that right, then Roman numeral 1, 2, and all the exceptions
Right,
and this
right.
and that.
I got you.
You see what I mean?
Other than the superintendent, so that goes along with the title of the policy. Is what I was getting
Yeah,
at.
yeah, it does.
Okay. So
Does that make any sense? It wouldn't be it would be inclusive of, I think, everyone that we want to be inclusive of, and it would exclude the
Right
one
there.
person we don't want in this policy.
okay. Good.
Would it include, let me ask you this. I mean, I don't know the answer to this question. Who in this building is considered an administrator?
Directors?
Directors of that and the
I don't
assistant
know what that
superintendent.
word, directors.
Director of Special Education.
Technology director,
Special
special
ed.
education.
Okay, yeah,
director,
help me out, because I don't know the lingo here, so.
Personnel director or human
Right.
Yeah,
resource director.
Human Resources Director,
Yeah.
Business
He was
Chief CFO?
so he would be an administrator.
But we don't need to name.
No,
the
I'm
rest of
not
those. That's
asking
what
to,
we
I'm
want.
just trying to make sure that we are, I'm sensitive to the notion that we're trying to be inclusive of everybody we want to be inclusive of, and exclusive of the superintendent.
So, yes, the superintendent per se is gonna be
Does that make
totally
me-
out here by itself.
Right.
And everything else under the superintendent will be able to manage, you're gonna see as we get through
Okay.
the flow of this at the end, you'll be able to manage the superintendent's position totally different.
At
Okay,
least somewhat different.
all right.
Okay, now that's been my,
So,
okay, that's helpful.
you got that's highlighted, the building principles in line, Roman number 1 is underlined for, oh, okay, that's a
Can I-
strikeout.
Well, right above it, you still gotta get rid of superintendent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, administrative appointments.
Yeah, delete that.
Yeah.
And can I ask, why is Roman numeral 1 there?
Roman number 1, this policy applies to the appointment of the superintendent. Using a board appointee, facility.
I don't understand
Facilitate
how
the
that's
superintendent
relevant.
search. Yeah, well, that's because all of that's dealing with the superintendent search.
So it should be
So
deleted.
it should be out of there. This policy applies to the appointment of,
Unless you're gonna have
You-
a second section of this policy, you don't even need anything that says administrative.
I don't think we need anything on Roman number 1, is that?
Right, that's the way
The
I
whole
read it.
Roman number 1 needs to not be there.
No, well, no, you need it to say, this policy applies to the appointment of administrators.
Well, isn't that what the policy says? Isn't that what we just said?
Let's see,
Up
here,
above?
district consistent.
Okay.
We
maybe
don't
not
say it
me.
that way, so if we,
Okay.
all right, can you do that, Frank?
Yeah.
That this policy applies to the appointment of administrators.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it just
All right,
seems
thanks,
like
Jim.
restating the same thing.
And we'll, when we get down through here, we'll
Well, we
look
can
and
come
see.
back. There's nothing.
And come
that's-
back and so forth. It's true that it looks like that. So if we take everything else
And everything else out of that.
out of that, the strike through, then we say, the Roman number 2 was posting, everything else was striking.
Struck, and
Struck.
I think actually,
Do we need?
I,
I don't know why we would then say posting. in there.
well,
It's how it comes about.
yeah.
So first it applies to this person, and then it's posted. Next is the qualification.
Right.
Okay,
I can't read the rest of it.
so the next one is exceptions may be made upon approval
So that would not be
of the
struck,
board chair.
right? So let's just go back
Let's
to
go.
whatever,
Position become available.
under posting, the section that was struck there for whatever reason, should not be, because that was something we should,
Right now, you're right, so.
that should
that's-
be included, I think.
It says that
Right.
when the position become vacant,
When
the superintendent
a position.
or his or her designee shall notify the appropriate level governing board as soon as possible, but at least 2 weeks prior to posting. So that now, because we've changed the subject and everything's in here, I think that.
That
should
would be
okay.
included.
That's all back in.
All
Yeah.
back in.
Wonderful.
Can we don't need, it seems to me, to make these all separate little lines, but, so that should be whatever, I don't know how you do that. There you go,
There you get it right there.
here we are.
Okay, so the next thing here,
Exception
then
may be made.
exceptions may be made upon approval of the board chair. Now, I don't know,
Why would that be?
why would that be necessary in there? Did anybody else know
Would
why
you
the
need
board
to
chair
even
would make
say
some
that?
exceptions to this? It's the superintendent that's doing all this.
The board can't make an exception to a posting, can they?
Well,
Well,
I
they
don't
can't
know that
believe
this
it's
is
it.
dealing with posting. I think
That-
this is, well, it's under there, well, I guess.
An exception in what sense?
What, well, we want the job, all the jobs, we want to tell them that they need to be posted.
Right,
And we don't want someone to be put in a job, but are at least posting the job so that everybody can see that. So,
yeah, but
I-
this is really not about that.
So,
The only issue then would be whether it must be posted 2 weeks in advance.
No, notified, the board must be notified
I
of
see.
its posting 2 weeks in advance of the
Right.
posting. The only issue here is, as I understand number 2, and help me out if I'm just reading it wrong, is that what number 2, the first sentence says is that if we're going to post the position of North Bennington principal, let's use you as an example, Bruce, then we have to notify the Prudential Committee 2 weeks before we post it, but the Prudential Committee chair could make an exception if we want to, if we want to post it and give you less than 2 weeks' notice.
That's my understanding as well.
okay, so
Okay.
that means, with that definition out there,
Well, I
and the
guess-
second one that follows that says the board reserves the right to delay,
Or
which is,
deny approval for
deny
posting of
approval for
position.
posting of the position. Now,
So
that's a
once
little
they-
bit different.
Yeah, because
So-
once they find out about it, they might say, oh no, let's not do this right now, let's wait.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can do that,
You can delay it, you can't
but you
hurry it
can't
up.
deny it. I mean, here's the problem. At some level, wouldn't a school board have to post it?
Well,
Well,
maybe,
Not unless you want, it's all of those administrators, it isn't just one.
I know.
So they could say, oh, we don't have enough money right now, we can't have this director.
So we can delay those
Right.
particular
That I can.
situations to post that's one of the examples for that.
Of?
I think then, why don't we leave it
Boy, it seems
right,
weird.
leave it, Dick,
yeah, well, I think I was sort of
With
going
Jackie?
where Jackie is going, but you may be restructuring your administrative
Right.
tier somehow, combining positions, eliminating positions. You might be in the middle of a budget, and if any of those situations occurs, somebody, and a board never does, a person has to do, so it falls to the chair
Yeah, well,
to stop that process.
Right, but here's
Okay.
what's happening. So the superintendent says, oh, I want 3 people who are directors up at the central office. And it comes back to the board, and the board says, not now. We're trying to get a budget passed. We'll have to find money for that later.
That's what I'm
So,
saying.
yeah.
right, and that's why I'm saying, I think this is okay the way it is. And just trying to understand it out here, but I think it's okay with, to have that language in there.
It
So,
would be a reason for an exception or a delay.
yeah. So if we can live with that, we'll move along.
Sure.
If we wanna go to section 3,
Could we?
You wanna go
could
back,
we-
Bruce?
Yeah, could we kind of walk through a scenario here again? I'm not sure I understand who's in control here.
The superintendent,
the soup,
A position has become vacant. Originally, this policy was aimed toward building principals.
Right.
that is
But now we're
correct.
including all administrators. for it.
That's, well, the building principals and administrators
So-
is what it was.
Right.
Okay.
No, it was just,
So the superintendent is going to notify an appropriate governing board when they're gonna when they've got a vacancy for a director
Absolutely,
at the SU level?
absolutely.
Okay,
So
So
now that
what-
they've done that, go ahead, you can speak
so
it.
then in the next room, we're saying we're gonna allow the board chairs to waive the 2 weeks prior posting.
But that's because the board chair is the directing of the board. Now, the board chair would have good reasons with the acting on behalf of the board to say why they this need to happen. And Jackie mentioned just one,
Yeah,
budgetary
yeah.
reasons. There are other things that we look at as a board to decide that, wait a minute, do we want the superintendent to do that right now? Dealing with all the other things out here we got to go with, we want to say to the superintendent, we want you to delay this until we get this cleared before we post that or field these out here along that line.
I understand,
Okay.
but the question is, but the wording of this makes it sound like the exception would be to waive the 2 week requirement before posting, when all the exceptions we've noted here would want to extend the
Well, it
period of
says,
time before.
Doesn't
it
say
says,
whether-
it's the right to delay or deny the
This is
approval of
almost
the
a
posting
separate
of the
item.
position. So it says both in that the board reserved the right to delay and/or deny approval of posting of the position.
I understand.
Okay,
So then that makes me wonder why the sentence above it is required at all.
it's giving, well,
The
it's
powers-
just
Giving
telling
the
you
notice.
that who the person would be is the board chair. Now, you could put that,
It's just giving the board notice that there is
Right.
going to be a posting so that the board can act. I
Good.
think that's what the intent was.
Right.
It's not overly clear, but
So-
I think board members tend to understand it, but boy,
Let's-
it's not
let's-
overly
okay.
clear.
let's give
I-
Sandra,
Yeah,
okay.
I think I can envision for myself a situation where both the board chair might want to waive the 2 weeks and you'd still have the right to Deny it.
or
Right.
delay.
Okay.
let it go on.
Sandra.
I'm sorry.
In my thought on that, I was wondering if it was because many of the boards only meet once a month, and if the board meets and then right after you found out that you needed to fill a position,
they wouldn't be able to
that
act on it
might
for
be a
another month.
situation
Right.
that you may not wanna wait another.
Yeah, the
Right.
chair says, we're not gonna call an emergency meeting here.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
understood.
wait until
Sure.
our next meeting to do this and let everybody know of such and such a thing along that line. So,
Okay.
and such thing as email, we don't like to use that in, but, okay, so if we're clear on that, let's go on to Roman number 3, qualification of the candidates. Candidates must hold and be eligible for the appropriate Vermont certifications. That's,
But I would like to add to that,
okay, Jeff?
before appointed.
Before appointed. Now, there is a waiver. You heard, we got, yes, we would like to have all those things out there. But now, we got a problem. Everybody that's qualified for the job may not have Vermont certifications. And so we can apply for a waiver from the state to do that. And so that's what falls under that. I mean, along that line, the appropriate Vermont certifications. Laura?
I was just saying that one of the challenges we ran into this past year was that one candidate didn't actually meet the provisional licensing guidelines. So there was a bit of a challenge, there was a bit of a delay between national certification and whatever, but if you put something in there that said, must meet certifications, you could do and/or, provisional guidelines, because there are very, for that particular position, it's really,
You're saying be eligible for, and that's the
Right.
key in that.
that's the key.
Be
If they're not
eligible for.
eligible yet, we can't put them in a position, have them performing the job unless they are already meeting that provisional license or the
Right.
certification.
And that's what normally happens. You have to go out and get those and come back. I think you request provisional license for an individual before they actually take place. We don't have, I don't know, Frank, you've had any?
Well, this is language that I see all the time posted, either have the certification or you're eligible for the certification, but I've
Right.
always wondered what exactly eligible means, really. I mean, anybody's eligible unless you've got a
Not necessarily.
No.
history of
Administrator's
criminal
license.
history
You
or
have
something.
to have all the education.
No, I'm not
to meet
eligible
that
for
when you
administrator's
come in.
license.
Right, and so there's criteria for becoming an administrator, and so you're eligible for it, but you hadn't got it because you
I
hadn't
definitely
applied
did.
for it in Vermont. We hadn't had a chance to get it or get it back and so forth along that line. So I think that's what we're talking about here. We bring in somebody that has all the qualifications from another state. They can get it in Vermont. It takes 90 days. Or it takes something else. I'm using 90 days as an example. They're eligible for it. We can apply for that and we can go ahead and they meet that criteria. So I think it's an appropriate thing to have and to keep just as is.
So, can I understand you rephrase the paraphrasing that for me? So your feeling is that Jackie's comments about having the quals upon appointment? I'm sorry, I'm not really following. what you're
Having the
saying.
certifications, I think you said. And then we're saying, whoa, this is where this board, the diversity of this board is good. having everyone here. That ties the hands of the administrators and stop the school cold without having that word be eligible for. I'm qualified, I'm eligible to be that position, but the state says you gotta apply, you gotta have my certification. I have applied for it. There's no reason why I won't get it, but 90 days is gonna be the time. Now, September roll around here, can I wait 90 days to leave the classroom open or the position open? Or can I have the person that's qualified and eligible for that position and that I've seek the approval from the state to fill that, and it just takes the time to show up?
Well, I feel that you're putting yourself at liability risk there if you do not ensure that the person meets the provisional licensing requirements as well.
We said eligible. That's what I'm saying.
Are eligible.
Okay, we're saying that they are.
Eligible at the time.
That's right. That's right.
At the
All
time
we're
of
doing,
appointment.
all we're doing is just looking for the piece of paper. We have everything else, and we just need the paper.
Okay.
I
Frank.
would suggest that we add the words though, and qualified, because the way I look at eligible is, I'm eligible to win the lottery, that doesn't mean I'm gonna do it. My daughter's eligible to, she can go to school and get her license, she's eligible, she's not disqualified. So I would just add, eligible and qualified for
Candidate must hold and be eligible
Eligible and
for.
qualified are the same word.
Yeah,
That's what the way.
yeah,
I
I wouldn't deal with
I
it.
heard the objection as
Okay.
being different than that.
Yeah.
Well,
And,
yeah, it
and I
is.
would like to hear more about why we would, maybe, this seems to me to be a discussion that at least if nothing else will happen when this goes around to the boards. Do you want to wait and not have do you want to have the language be candidates must hold the appropriate Vermont certification, period?
No.
No.
Some, I
No.
understand that some, but if that's not the case, then it seems to me eligibility for or be qualified for mean the same thing
Right,
in this context, at
Right.
least.
right.
I agree.
Correct. And I think we should move on.
So,
Okay.
and that's what I was gonna say, I love it, but we need to move right
Okay.
on with
I
this
just
thing.
trying to
So,
clarify.
we're gonna go to Roman number 4, application process out here. The candidate must submit a resume, transcript, and so forth in 3 letters. It's nothing wrong with that, I
Wait,
think.
I have a question about that. I didn't understand why we needed the transcripts, and the reason I didn't is because if you're eligible for an appropriate Vermont certification, I know
what
that
they are.
my transcripts are probably written with Roman numerals, they're so old.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering why that would be
I don't know where
necessary.
that language came from, but, you can still, right now, go back to your college that you attend, if it's still in existence somewhere, and request a transcript to be, so I wouldn't,
You
I
can
wouldn't wanna
request
take.
it, Leon, but
Yeah.
speaking on behalf of my daughter who's trying to become a state trooper, she couldn't get them
Couldn't.
from UVM.
Oh,
So it
must
says
qualify.
that there's
And she's
problems
not
out
that.
there somewhere, and she can't get them, it's a problem.
I guess I just didn't understand why we would need them if we are going to have somebody who's eligible for appropriate Vermont certification.
I
Because
wouldn't.
Vermont will ask, during the certification process,
Right.
the state will ask that candidate to submit their
Right.
transcripts.
Well,
I don't
perhaps
know.
having the transcripts will say, I am eligible, and you haven't gone through the process yet of applying for, applying for the certification.
Then I guess my whole understanding with this 3 candidates must hold or be eligible for takes care of that.
but this is the process. This is just saying, here's the application process that's down here. That's all. That statement's fine. All it's telling you, hey, candidates must submit certain things. We want all to be consistent here. We want a resume from everybody. We would like to have a transcript from everybody. We want 3 letters of references from everybody along that line. All we're telling them is that all of the people that we're gonna look at, we want you to give us these things for us to determine whether you're eligible for the position.
But you've eliminated people based on one simple concept, if they can't get transcripts.
I
And
would,
they may be eligible, but they can't get transcripts.
If I could suggest an alternate wording, instead of transcripts, perhaps evidence of qualifications?
Well, that would be okay for some professions, but in the
But
teaching
educational,
profession, no, I would hold to the transcripts.
right, and so we're dealing with education, and I'm saying, this is all learning and institutionalized structure, and I would hate to take that away. Transcript is a language that I think is well understood, even though we know we may having some problems out here. I think that if we let it stay and move, and if it need be, that if this district has a problem with getting transcript from individuals, we need to come back and revisit this.
But it might be too late. If
We can always have the superintendent or somebody come
Wait.
back and come in and say, here's what the situation is, and manage that. So I would prefer in an educational institution to leave transcript in there, because that is a common language. Even though some institutions are having trouble providing them out there, they got an issue. And so if that goes out into the banner that UVM can't provide transcripts for the people that they graduate, they don't look too good.
But
But
that wouldn't happen though, because it wouldn't get to that level,
Right.
because they've been eliminated.
Right, and that's not what we want to do.
Well,
But
Right.
they-
That's what it's gonna
That's
do.
what it's going to do though.
But
That's-
also
Yeah.
the individual probably, in most cases, has a copy, and they can say, these are
I do know.
copies.
I have mine, but that won't be acceptable.
They won't be
That
acceptable,
won't be
but
acceptable.
because UVM is having this problem, I'm submitting these, and I will get the permanent copies when it becomes available.
Right, and I would think we won't accept that. It's gonna come from the school, the institution.
Right.
And have their letter, and they stamp, and they emblem on it, and all this other kind of stuff. So I think that if we leave it, and that there is some discretion in all these things when somebody comes up. If you were the principal of the school and you start running into a problem here with that, and you need to make known to the board that I got an issue here, they can address certain things, and these things could come back if they're at a level enough that want that, I think. But I wouldn't want to take it out.
we would violate the policy.
If a teacher applies for a position and they have their Vermont certification, do they need to provide transcripts?
That's what this says.
No, it doesn't, because it doesn't apply to teachers. This applies to
Well,
administrators.
So,
This is-
start again.
Administrative certification.
But this is
Right.
the application process, so they don't have it here yet because they haven't gotten it. All we've done is above is stated things, and now we're telling you below, here's the process.
Right, but
In order to be eligible for the other stuff above.
So I wouldn't be able to hire Mr. Francis' daughter as a police officer, because she couldn't get me her transcripts. She's not even in my applicant.
So she's
pool.
not eligible right now.
Yeah, so she's out.
And so now you come back and say, hey, look, we got real issues. We got some great candidates
no,
to
you
the
wouldn't even
board.
look that far.
I mean, you may not if you got some others.
No, you just wouldn't look that far
Yeah.
because they
Right.
can't provide you with a transcript.
Right,
Right.
okay, we wouldn't go that
That's so you'll never, the boards will, I think
never
the
know.
point I'm hearing is that the boards will never know, because the superintendent will never know, because the transcripts, and I will say, there are more, I say this only because my sister is a registrar of a large university, and there are lots of schools that are working really hard at keeping those transcripts available. I don't know how UVM would have had a problem with that, but I can understand why it would be difficult for some candidates to get transcripts. But if it's difficult for them to get transcripts for hiring, it's going to be difficult for them to get transcripts for
Anything.
certification, and I don't know how you get around that.
Yeah.
Well,
I
let me,
w-
I'm sorry.
What-
Okay,
no,
but
what
so
I wanted
think-
to do was
I don't
not-
see a change.
Not focus and kill the learning institution that we've been speaking of out here.
No,
because
no,
that's
I
not-
think that's-
I wouldn't want to, go on
Right.
and keep labeling that conversation that way. That's what I was trying to say.
Right.
Okay, so
Exactly.
we'll move on from that. There are some institutions that are giving us problems with getting transcripts, and so we hope
That's
that
true.
that no matter what, whether we request it and they provide it to us, or the state requested, they still have the same issue.
That's, I
Okay.
think, the issue, that's the
That's the
problem.
issue.
That's
And
the
that
issue.
should be going, I mean, that individual or whoever should raise that level of awareness back to the institution and says, hey, guys, you're causing me work, you know, or this and that out there. So, okay, so we'll move right on for that. That's enough. Screening process is what I wanted to get to. This is Roman number 5. The superintendent or his or her designee will conduct an initial review of the applicants. Now, this is appropriate because we're talking about building level individuals, so that statement is still good, I think. There's nobody wanna, because
It's
we're,
not just building level.
well, I mean, we're talking about it, everybody except the
other than-
superintendent.
Exactly.
All right, that's what I meant, that's what I meant, Bruce, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right.
Okay.
So now, B, whenever possible, within 1 week after the date of closing, the personnel committee of the board will meet with the superintendent, his or her designee, to review the credentials of the 6 most qualified candidates. If there are fewer than 6 applicants, the committee will review all applicants and vice versa will be omitted. So I don't see anything wrong with that statement for what we're talking about, other than the superintendent.
Okay, so when the board meets, when the super committee meets to go over the 6 most qualified candidates, those 6 candidates are going to have the resume, the transcripts, and the 3 current letters.
Sure, yes.
No, they will. 'cause
They will
that's-
have it, yes,
That's what it
okay,
says.
Thank you.
okay.
That's what it
No,
is.
so all of that's
That's what it
good.
says.
Here's where we're getting into the problem at. The Roman number 6 is the appointment process. The committee, and that word committee, will present a complete dossier of 3 best qualified candidates to the board in executive session. Okay, so now this was supposedly dealing with the superintendent. This particular area, A was. And since we're not dealing with the superintendent here, will we be, oh no. The committee will present a complete dossier of the 3 best qualified candidates to the board, but the board won't be, the superintendent is gonna be recommending here.
I
Right,
think you gotta go
that's-
back to B and change that, so there's no personnel committee that's recommending, because you want the superintendent to
Right.
recommend the
Yeah.
administrators.
Right, that's,
No, it's up, Frank, it's Roman numeral 6B, isn't it?
5B,
Or is it 5B?
Right here.
Oh, there is a committee.
because you don't have a
Excuse me.
personnel committee if the superintendent is recommending.
right. The person there, the first line on B.
How did you
like,
get
Yes,
from
we really
6
have to
to
change
3?
this.
how do we- Well,
Yeah, well, this speaks about 6 people, and the next one in 6 speaks about 3
That's
being
what
Okay.
the
recommended.
confusion
Made the
was,
cut.
because we were.
the superintendent made the cut. See, this is what I'm saying,
Okay.
oh, the committee, now, maybe you got a good question. And here, what we've asked for is to not have an individual do the cutting or the reviewing process alone. Even though they're the superintendent, we ask, I mean, if we look at that form, I think we have several individuals work with the superintendent to screen or review those on the application form. Is that?
I was just going to say, I've sat on a few committees that have actually recommended to the superintendent, who in turn recommends to the board or with
Right.
board members. And
Right.
the process becomes, you have a lot and you start to narrow it down. And so there's a point where the board may decide on those best of the best that they may also want to interview the people that are going to be hired. And that's why it started at 6 and whittles down. But sometimes I'm not so sure that there will be 3 best qualified, there might be 2 best qualified.
Right. And so what we see on the application form, we got in 30 applicants. Someone of a committee screened down 6 or 5 or whatever. And then one of those were selected and the superintendent is recommending that individual for the position to the board. Okay, so that particular, I think the language of personnel, we using the personnel committee, and then we got that there because we don't want the superintendent to do all of this alone. We want them to select other staff members or somebody else to be part of that.
Is there now a standing personnel committee?
Board, I believe there's a board personnel committee.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so there's a standing personnel committee of the board.
you,
That's what
if
it
not, it
says.
gets appointed
Personnel committee of the board.
of the board.
Right,
Will
I
meet with the
understand that's what it says in the regulation. My question is whether the board has one.
I don't think we consistently have one. It's only at that particular time that it may be appointed by the board. Says, okay, this is what we got going on. We need to set aside some individuals to work with the superintendent on this.
Who selects those people to work with?
The chair,
Chair, board chair.
appointed by the chair.
Okay,
Okay.
then that's what the reg should say. That's what the policy should say. Within a week after the date of closing, the chair of the board will
Assemble it.
assemble a personnel committee of X number to work with the superintendent on selection of the fund.
Okay. Now, what if, in some of these particular cases, Senator, that's what I'm saying, you use other staff members along that line. You, in the North Bennington and in Bennington and at MAU, there is, Frank may be, depending on the individual and the position, determine who become part of that review process.
I understand.
Okay,
I'm not, we don't have to codify how the chairman makes that selection, but we have to make it clear that it's the chair's prerogative to name the people that are going to be assembled
Okay.
for this personnel committee.
I just didn't want, I wanted to make sure that that was exactly the process in terms of making sure it happened that way and not tie the hands of the individual. But that's what should happen in order to do that, is at least the chair be made aware of with the superintendent that these are the individuals that we're gonna select and put on that. So
But I
you
think-
can still put it that way.
I
Is that,
think this is a very important point.
okay,
Does the superintendent name this personnel committee that they're going to work with, or does the chair?
and so what I've seen is both has been happening, because depending on the position, and say here in central office, normally it's several other individuals that may be working with, that have common interests out there, that reviews it with the superintendent. Now, it may be that then the board comes up and says, you know, we want to have a board member. Normally, you don't have, normally we don't have the board members, only when we come around with, I'm trying to see when we have board members, because we're gonna approve it.
Principal.
With principals,
Principal.
with the principals, that's right, with the principals, okay. Oh, it's no
That would
easy
be-
way out of this.
No, there isn't.
It's not,
But, you know, we're trying to help people
yeah.
That's right.
work through this process without having to reinvent it every time
Exactly.
they have a vacancy. So that's why I'm pressing to try to get these issues resolved as much as we can. in
And I think-
So
policy.
Jackie can come
So
up
they
with
can
some
be reviewed.
smooth language for us.
Yeah, I
So-
think Bruce is absolutely correct,
Right.
and his first wording was very good. And scrap out whenever possible, and start with within 1 week after the date of closing. The board chair, I guess it's of the SVSU, correct?
Yeah. As-
The SVSU board chair,
Well, it
Well,
would, it could be,
necessarily.
it could be Mount Anthony, it could be BSD, it could be North Bennington, it
If
could
it's
be
a
Pownell.
no,
well, no, we're talking about
administrative position.
administrative positions.
But we're talking about, what is the principle in
Yeah.
that?
Do you want to sit on the
Principals.
board to hire the Woodford principal?
I don't.
Right,
I-
that's why we
So-
have to make sure the word.
So-
But somebody
so
in
we may
Woodford, the
be-
Woodford
so we
board
may
chair
be-
might want to have some say in that.
Yeah.
Right.
So we might be devolving again into whether we can make this policy suit all administrators.
Well, we can when we're using the board chair, will, you know, either work with the superintendent to select the personnel committee.
So we
Within
just
that.
say board chair.
Yeah,
and assume that if it's for Woodford, it would be the chair of that board.
That's right, that's right,
So what we
okay.
need to say is the chair of the local board, or the
Ah.
responsible board,
Yeah,
Okay,
Okay.
that's
the
good.
hiring board.
the hiring.
The hiring board.
Yeah, the board to which, yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly
We're
who it
gonna
is,
use
it's
it.
the
So
hiring
within
board.
1 week after the date of closing, the hiring board,
Chair.
The chair of the
the
hiring.
chair of the hiring board,
Okay.
will
Well-
appoint a committee
Oh, I hate when I have to do this.
and then drop down to review the credentials of the 6 most qualified candidates.
Right, yeah, that's
Personnel
perfectly
committee
fine.
of the boards.
So just delete everything in between
2 and
where your
personnel.
cursor is all the way down to 2. There you go. You got it.
Okay.
That sounds clean.
All right, I feel better now.
Well, actually, I was gonna, yeah.
That's what we all want.
That's what we want.
Typically, there is a search committee that does this, and I was gonna,
I
you know, throw my monkey wrench.
We're screening.
This is a
It's screening.
screening committee.
This
This
is
is not a
screening.
search committee.
Okay, screening, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a search committee.
Okay, so,
That's-
well, that's the word that was in there. So now let's go back down to
Now we're back down, now we're down to
this
6.
Roman number 6, and says the committee will present the complete dossiers of the 3 best qualified candidates to the board.
To what board?
That's not how that
And
happens.
executive. This is the part that's confusing because this is what we want in terms of the superintendent. See, now,
Right.
this
I
part
understand
here
that.
should not be there because this is dealing with the
That's
superintendent.
right, that's exactly.
So we're gonna
correct.
take that out and we're gonna hold that, we'll hold that for the next,
How about the, yes, we could
policy
copy that
because-
later.
because we're gonna talk about the functionality of the committee, whether it's a
Right.
screening committee or whether it's what other kind of committee, because that's where we're having the problem. Bruce?
Help me out, Amy, you board members will probably know this better, but is it not the case then that once that committee that we just created, or just identified, comes up with 3 best candidates, they present them to the superintendent, and the superintendent then picks a candidate to present to the board for hiring?
That's exactly what happens.
Well, isn't that the way it's supposed to happen under statute in Vermont? That the superintendent actually names a candidate? I mean, I'm just,
But you got the principle, well, see,
if it seems to me that it's the superintendent who provides it's not some committee. I mean, the committee can help them narrow it down.
you do.
But it's the superintendent who is actually the person whose certificate is on the line when boards are hiring people underneath the superintendent. Am I
Right, and
not-
you do, that's recommended by the superintendent, the last person on there is
It's
recommended by the superintendent.
superintendent. The
Okay.
superintendent makes a recommendation. That's all I'm saying.
Does
That's
this
what-
also apply to building principals?
Yeah,
That's
Okay.
correct.
That's
I
what it
believe
says
so.
in C.
I believe it applies to all administrators other than the superintendent.
But then this A wouldn't necessarily.
Oh, no. I
A,
think
we're gonna
we
strike,
did.
oh, we've already did A. So let's,
Uh-huh.
B, the candidates may or may not, be
I think that's-
requested to be interviewed by the board. That still wouldn't be for this is
Not
superintendent.
for this position.
That's for the
These
superintendent.
positions.
The superintendent would recommend a candidate for appointment.
Not
That
necessarily,
part.
you could. You
That's
could.
good. In
For
the
example,
event
could the
that the
superintendent
recommendation,
ask
a
him?
recommended candidate is not appointed, the board may
Exactly.
request to review additional candidates or direct for a reposting of position. So I think C is good.
Excuse
Well,
me,
we can have a
why don't we
discussion.
strike B?
B still deals with the superintendent, in terms of appointment of a superintendent. Let's go back, I mean, that's what
No,
I was
let's go
thinking.
back.
The candidate may or may not be requested to be interviewed with the board.
With
And
the
we-
board.
With
I'm
the board.
sorry,
We
I
don't-
read that as with the committee.
No.
No, with the board,
So,
so we don't
I
need
wouldn't
that.
even
person.
understand, can we not do this in passive voice for one thing? So let's say if we were to keep B, who would be requesting, I mean, could the board, let me ask it this way. Let's say the superintendent has has a candidate that they want to bring to the Pownell School Board for principal, can the Pownell School Board request that they meet with that candidate?
As, it depends on how you want to set up the policy, but I'd recommend against doing that.
Yeah, I wouldn't, I
Oh,
would,
I think the committee would interview the candidates. Ultimately, the superintendent's going to make the final single recommendation.
for that position, so we wouldn't wanna do that. I wouldn't want to violate.
Okay, that's why we would
All three
eliminate,
candidates, if you're only gonna let them vote
Right.
on one.
so that's
That's why we want to be
Right.
out of there.
well,
So,
I was thinking of the candidate as the candidate that the superintendent is recommending.
and I'm gonna try to move a
But that's
little
fine.
bit faster because I definitely wanna get to the other
You
policy
do.
on here. Yes, and it's
luck.
close to our time, we wanna make sure that we get something in here. So C is good the way it is, and
In the event
leave it
the
alone.
candidate
And so
cannot
with this
afford-
particular,
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to read that.
okay, the superintendent will recommend a candidate for appointment. In the event that the recommended candidate is not appointed, the board may request
Right.
the review of additional candidates or direct the reposting of the position. So,
Right.
All of the superintendent comes up with something, yeah, okay, I'll cut it short. If everybody's saying okay,
Yeah.
then we all set with that.
Put it to bed.
Okay, so
sounds-
that's ready to go on to SBS cleanup and go to SVSU for one.
All right.
Okay, the next item on here, we removed the draft policy for, no, we didn't. Okay, that's the one we want, 4. Do we have, that's the draft, a proposed draft policy, public participation at the,
We said we were gonna hold that till the May meeting because Bruce was still,
no, I thought Bruce, he had that one.
I already had a working,
He has
you
it.
have a working document that's in paper.
He has
This is
it.
the one that
And it was online as well.
Yes, that's the one that he just distributed, and you're welcome to wait until whenever, or look at it now and,
We have a few minutes, let's.
I mean, can I just,
Okay.
I'd be happy to just, if you wanna flip it over to the last, here's the only substantive, a lot of this had to do with just changing things like school board, just making verb subject agreement. My question had to do with the very last lines,
22.
yes, the ones that are crossed off.
Okay.
And the
let's-
reason I'm proposing that we not have those is that they have nothing to do with public comments at meetings.
Which,
by
what line
persons-
is that?
The one,
50?
all the ones that are crossed, there we go.
56 down.
56 and following. It's all true and all very good. I'm not denying that. It just doesn't have anything to do with this policy. It has to do with conversations outside of posted meetings.
You clean up, what got posted is not what I'm, okay, I
Exactly.
got both,
What
okay.
got you got both. and
I got
that's
what you cleaned up,
Right,
and so what you're looking at, to everybody, the handout copy,
right, is
is not, is
this one.
that
Is
one
this
there?
one. Right, not what you got earlier.
What I got, okay.
Okay, so if you look at 56, and you're welcome to put it back in, I just didn't think it was relevant to this. It's all perfectly true and all perfectly good, and I would think it's already in the school board members' manual for how you deal with stuff.
It is.
Okay, so I just don't think it belongs here. I think it's just not relatable. The only other thing that I added, sorry Leon, I hate to interrupt you,
Okay.
is there is a policy that I just referenced that wasn't referenced in the original, and that's policy 1025, public complaints about personnel. And I thought that ought to be in that one section C, yeah, it's on line 50 and 51 of page 2. So with that, I've just basically brought the document into some order so
Okay.
that you can see how things work. I do think if there are in fact protocols about communication, that those protocols ought to be published.
We just got through going through the Vermont School Board's training, and this very section was one of the items that we talked about for
Right.
some time in the meeting in terms of individual board members and their responsibility to the public in trying to make sure that, one, we realize that we are public and elected officials and that we have a duty to listen and hear
Right.
and can't act individually, but we are obligated to make sure that we give them some informative information to where to go and what to do in terms of the proper protocol
Absolutely.
going back to the school and so forth along that
Sure.
line. This is the part that I think you're saying you're taking out.
No, and the
Oh.
reason I'm taking out is because it doesn't have anything to do with public participation at board meetings.
So we needed,
You see what I mean?
No need
It's,
to consider.
Okay.
it is
At the
not
meeting.
about
Uh,
public
all right.
It's
Participation.
comments outside the meeting.
All right, it's
to
outside.
individuals.
You're right, it's
So,
out.
so
it's
why
okay.
have it here? I think it's I agree that it's exactly correct.
All right, all right.
It's just not relevant.
Right, okay. You
That's
got it.
all I'm saying.
I agree.
I got it. You got it. I agree.
So, there are, and I did, if you want to go back, sort of the hopscotching, line 21 or thereabouts of page 1. Yes, there it is. Oh, it's line 22 on this version. In order to assure that persons the prudential boards or the school boards and prudential committee adopt the following procedures and rules pertaining to public participation at meetings. You don't have to adopt anything as policy. The whole thing is a policy, and therefore you don't need that. And I think I just cleaned up the language other than that.
Yes,
Okay.
did a great job.
So
That
now
was
it
last
just
night on the
goes,
plane back from Chicago. At some ungodly hour.
so the only thing left then at the end was the communication protocol place was to be able to set agenda. Is that what that would take place there?
I would-
Is the,
I wasn't quite sure what was being referred to by communication protocols, but if it were me, and I would consider them administrative regulations.
right, and that's what I was gonna
And that's
say.
what I would call them, administrative regulations. These are communication protocols, and publish them with the policy, because that way, if I'm a lay person trying to figure out, well, where do I go if I've got this issue? I have a place, here's my participation in, at board meetings. Oh, I can't talk about teacher XYZ. I can't talk about Mr. Lee Clark and his crappy teaching at the CDC in the public meeting. But here's where I can go with it.
Okay, let me get Laura's comment on that because I want to
Public
make sure.
comments.
Yes, I wanted to make sure I know you've been waiting for a while. I wanna make, and it's 6 o'clock and I'm saying, oh, I gotta get that in. I'm
And
sorry.
that's okay, and I just wanted to address the fact that, now that we have your copy, Bruce, I would like to review it, spend a little more time with it, just to double check it, but, one of the challenges that I have, because I am someone who comes to a lot of board meetings, is the conflicting instruction from the boards that I've received. I have received information from BSD to approach the board members outside of board meetings, because they don't wanna tie up board meetings with what I wanna talk about. And on the flip side, I get from the SVSU and other MEU, oh, no, that's this board's, okay, we'll take comments, Leon, you're fully aware of this, we'll take your comments, and then it gets referred to a different committee or a different board, or someone will follow up. The challenge I have is that if I've seen the public participation at board meetings. I can tell you less than 3 people at any given board meeting. And I find that considering the size of our supervisory union and things like that, our educational system, that's small potatoes. And the issues that are being brought forth to the boards are those that the boards are not aware of. So the only communication protocol that residents have is to reach out to the boards, because there is none that exists internally, or the ones that do are not working. They're not effective, or they're failing. So who else is the taxpayer and the resident supposed to go to other than the boards?
Well, this is why this policy is one of the things in place. We want to formalize the method and get it out so that everybody can know and be consistent from board to board. So we got board, we got Pownell, BSD, we got Wolford,
Right.
we got Shedford, we got North End, we got Mount Anthony, and we got SVSU. We want everybody to agree to be able to accept public participations in a manner that's acceptable to all along that line. And that's what needs to happen out here to be able, one, understand, and the other part is to make sure that the public knows that the publicly elected officials has a duty to try to make sure at a meeting that's been warned and scheduled to take care of that business. But at the same time, you need to hear comments from the public. Now, the way you hear those comments, and we're going to wind up getting it found out there, is that one, I've read about 20 or 30 different school board pieces out there for public participation, and everybody doesn't. Some people limit people to minutes. So many different people on a subject. There's all kind of ways to do that out here. We have a policy that Bruce referenced in that one, that if there's documented information that needs to be distributed to the board, it should first go to the chair, and the chair has the opportunity to review it and put it on the agenda. So that's the way that one should happen. But for the actual meeting, you come to the meeting and get acknowledged as public participation, and that is public to be heard. But then the board's responsibility should not be a dialogue. It should be, let me hear what someone has to say by a particular topic and put that together if necessary, some information to reply back to the public that this is what, we heard, this is what we're assigning to the superintendent or to the principal or somebody to put that information together and come back, and we'll make that a line item for discussion and take care of that thing. So that's how you get the public information in that way at that particular time. So, okay, well,
Okay, Mike, I wasn't quite through, because
Okay.
one of the challenges that I have is that if the superintendent and the board chair are the ones in control of what information the board receives, then how can a community member come and inform the board of a particular challenge or of a particular systemic issue that may be taking place where they are not getting the response that they are hoping to achieve through their through the communication protocols, through whatever policy or procedure that may be currently established. Hold on.
Okay.
The other issue is that if I want to come and provide information to the board members, because I feel that a lot of times they're not quite aware of something, and the only way we can share it with them is by bringing it there, because we have no access to a publicly elected official off of the SVSU website. I have asked for email addresses, phone numbers to reach board members.
The process for what you're saying, I'm saying,
Yeah.
when the public verbally comes to the school board meeting, that becomes part of the minutes. The
But it
board
says
is,
here that they can strike them.
that becomes part of the minutes. If you document, and anybody documents stuff, it has to be reviewed and screened according to our policy 21 something along that line. The board chair only reads and help prepare with the superintendent the agenda for that information. Now, grant you the information that you may be providing has merit, has substance to it, and should be shared with the board. If there are other information that comes to the board, that comes at the board way, no name, no date, and no signature, no something, and it has all types of things in it, should not come to the board based on the policy that says you need to do these particular things, because if someone is preparing all this stuff, they should recognize it with a name, date, and vice versa and so forth along that line. And that gets passed on. So all we're doing is structurally preparing information. So if we put together a policy and we structurally have everything we need to have in it, and the boards are not following that, then the name will be mud spelled backwards. And so we're gonna work on those particular things out there to make sure, but first of all, we don't have a policy. And the information is flowing in all directions, and we're trying to systematically put one into place, not to exclude anybody, but to make sure we control or how that information is being managed and that it gets addressed appropriately. And so I think this is what we're gonna do with this. This is what this policy is gonna wind up doing. And with the administrative regs, we're going to agree in here, even though the administrators take care of that, but because of this is a real sensitive issue with the board chair and with the administration, we'll be sitting down together with the different board of directors and say, this is how we want all of our board meetings to be conducted. And we'll make sure that Shasberry, Pownell, Bennington, Woodford, and Mount Anthony, and everybody agree that we're going to manage information this way. And you then have documented information and have a channel to make sure all these things get managed the way they're supposed to have been managed out here consistently from board to board. And that's what the goal is. Jackie?
Yes, there's a new item, and the item came up at the BSD board, and this is for a future meeting. And the item was, how do children who were grandfathered, well, who are not grandfathered in on the No Child Left Behind, maintain their membership in a school? So for instance, if a person lives in Bennington proper and wants to go to Monument, because siblings are at Monument.
But we have a policy in place, and we have one for BSD, and we'll go out and pull that one in because we can have the discussion, but one.
Well, I don't want the discussion to happen tonight.
Yeah.
That board asked me to bring this to this board.
Right, and I'm saying there is a policy in terms of residency and all this other stuff out here. So what we're gonna have to do is go out and pull those policies in and say, and that would be easy. I mean, it's easier that if BFD, if you looked at it and says, well, what's our policy right now? There is a residency policy, and there is a tuition policy, and there's all that kind of, what's wrong with it?
Yes, it was just recently challenged, that's why.
That's right, and so what we're gonna do is get that particular number, and this is how we manage it in here. We'll get that policy number, we'll get the comments from BSD that's being challenged, and
No, it's up above.
go
right?
through it along that line.
It's actually right up.
So he's not looking for, that's what I wanted to make
Yeah,
sure.
it's- I
And the
don't think
reason
it's
I'm
there.
going this way, we're actually 8 minutes after 6. And as much as I love this committee, I try to make sure we stay on time.
As we all do.
Okay, and so, I really wanna say that this is as far as we can go this month. And I really appreciate everybody's participation, and we're gonna continue to move on and move forward, and we'll get together on agenda items with Catherine and for the next meeting.
So when you have those policies, could you send them to me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.